From one of Australia's former leading homicide detectives, this is I Catch Killers with Gary Jubelin.
In part one of my chat with Sally Leydon, we spoke about her mother, Marion Barter's mysterious disappearance and the problems with the police investigation. Now in part two, Sally talked about the sensational evidence that came out in the inquest regarding Mr. Blum, who has seen Marion around the time of her disappearance. Mr. Blum is a person who went through life with 14 different aliases. I also asked Sally a personal question about what she most wants to happen regarding her mother's disappearance. Sally, welcome back to part two of I Catch Killers.
Hello.
I offered you condolences at the start of part one on what you've been through with your mother disappearing 27 years ago. And I've got to say the frustrations that you must feel with the roadblocks you've hit and your effort to just keep picking yourself up and still trying to find answers for your mum. So again, full credit to you and condolences that you've had to go through that.
No worries, thank you. Well, look, I tell you, like the roadblocks keep coming too. Just because we get an answer from the coroner as well, it doesn't mean that I've actually, 2024 was one of the worst years I've actually had in life, actually. Just getting to the end of being told that your mother is deceased and then having to work out the next steps in that as a missing person and someone whose case is a little convoluted and a little confusing. There's two names involved. You know, it has been an absolute diabolical time for me.
There's bizarre twists and turns, and looking at it, I found it interesting from a former homicide detective's point of view. And we left part two talking about Rick Blom, or whatever he's calling himself these days. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit more what you found out. Then we'll start talking about what came out during the inquest. But just in the lead up to the inquest, because when was the inquest held? That was
2022, and it ended in February 2024.
Okay, when the findings were handed down.
Yeah.
Okay, so in that period before that, the matter has been referred to from missing persons to unsolved homicide.
I don't think it ever sat with missing persons,
right.
To be honest. It sat with local command up in Byron Bay and Tweed Heads. Is where it sat.
And when did it go to homicide?
Late 2019.
2019.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was allocated a homicide detective and a new OIC.
Yeah. What information did you uncover before leading into before the inquest?
Well, we found the ad in the paper.
Yep.
That was in the May, and that was such a big breakthrough for us because we had found someone who had the same name, who was around the same age. So if you think about 1994, the ad was placed, and he was saying he was 47, and in 1997, my mum's 51. Yep. So you do the math, right? Okay. They're all around the same age, and same location. Geographical. Yep. And that's another thing that's blowing my mind with this case. Like, everything is geographically in line, in sync, all in the same backyard, essentially. So anyway, I went with the Channel 7 team. We flew over to Luxembourg. Yep. And the reason Luxembourg is important, which is something we haven't touched on, is that on my mum's her outgoing passenger card, she said that her name was Florabella Ramikel. She was divorced. She ticked that she's divorced, and she ticked that she's leaving permanently to go and live in Luxembourg. Home duties was her occupation. When she comes back in 6 weeks later, a different route on a different airline. So she's left on Korean Air. She's come back in on Cathay, which we found, by the way, I like to add this because the timeline is very tight, but we've actually spoken to captains and people who worked for Cathay, and they said that was the quickest way to get from Europe back to Australia back in 1997. Yep. That he knew exactly the airline code and everything we were giving him, and he just rattled it off straight away for us. So that's interesting in itself. She's flown back in from Hong Kong, and she has ticked now. She's still Florabella Ramikel, but she's ticked that she's married. And the tick is very exaggerated. So all the other ticks are quite small on that page, but the tick for marriage is huge. And she says she's coming for 8 days to see family. That was pretty much it. And that she ticked also that she was not a resident of Australia, which we thought was interesting. Found out last night, actually, someone commented on my Facebook group that Luxembourg is spelt differently if you're a European.
Oh, that's interesting.
I didn't know that. And the way it's written on the incoming passenger card or outgoing passenger card, it's spelt that way. It's spelt like a European spelling. So that, just for knowledge, I thought that was interesting.
Little pieces.
Tidbits of information.
Yep.
So, so anyway, we fly over. We located the address of a gentleman whose name was F. Ramakel. Turns out it was Fernand. The M in the ad was actually Monsieur.
Okay.
How they speak, I guess, and how they write in the newspaper. So MF was Monsieur Fernand Ramakel, looking for love. So we find an F. Ramakel who's the same age, who lives in Luxembourg, and we go and knock on his door. He greeted me with a little hostility. I put my hand out to shake his hand and he ignored my hand. I had an interpreter with me. We were both nervous. You can hear us walking up to the front door and crackling on the rocks because I was with the Channel 7 team, and obviously they wanted to capture what he was going to say to me,
that
right?
Would make most people nervous.
And I know, and
Yeah.
I said to him, I said to Brian, actually, Seymour, who was with me as part of the podcast team, and I said, my husband's going to kill me. If he knew what I was doing right now, he would be not very happy with me. I'm a mother of 3 children. I can't be doing this. But it was just wild. It was a wild ride. We go up to his door. He's really rude to me. I had my mum's photo. I said, do you know my mum? Like, and he was just, I don't speak English. Like, I don't speak English. And Sarah is saying to me, he's telling us we should go. We need to go. And then he closed the door in our face. So we walked off, and his wife was out the front taking photos of the boys. I'd said to the boys, sit in the car down on the road. I don't want you to come up and put cameras in their faces. These people could be very innocent and they could potentially not know anything. And, you know, I'm not about walking in and dropping a bomb on someone's lap and then walking away and going, oh, sorry about that. Now you're going to ask your husband what's the go with the woman from Australia. Like, I was very conscious of that. Anyway, he called the police. They came. We'd already seen them that morning, which sort of helped our favour because they knew why we were there. Yeah. And we meant no harm. We were just trying to ask some questions and see what he knew. And he also happened to be a soccer player who played professional for Luxembourg. So all these little links, it was just wildly crazy in our brains. Anyway, we were all spinning out by it. And anyway, during that time while we were over there, we also found the phone number for Fernand Ramakel's ex-wife, Monique Cornelius. And so we rang and spoke to her, and this is before we went out to Fernand's because he wasn't home. We'd been going out there every day for 3 days and he wasn't there. And there was an election happening that weekend, and we just took a punt that maybe they'll come back for the election because they're very liberal on voting over there and it's a big thing. So we rang and Monique answered the phone, and she spoke to us for a little bit, and it was a bit confusing because Fernand's sister-in-law is Marion as well. So she thought we were talking about his sister-in-law. There's a little confusion. Obviously, there's a language barrier there too, but she did speak English and she did speak to us. Fast forward, Mr. Rick Blum had a relationship, which he denies, but Monique has shown she produced a love letter that he'd written to her at the inquest, which was very unusual. But they had a relationship.
Okay.
So if that makes sense, so we've got the real Fernand Ramakel here with his new partner, and then we've got his ex-wife over here, Monique, and then we've got Rick Blum, who used to live in Luxembourg for a period. His daughter to his current wife was born in Luxembourg. The real Fernand Ramakel, he had his identification stolen, and Rick Blum was using his identification back here in Australia.
And another little twist to it was that Rick Blum had a relationship with...
Yeah, with his ex-wife, Monique Cornelius.
Okay, small world.
I should probably qualify that as how that came about. So Monique was obviously married to Fernand Ramakel, and in his statement, Rick Blum agreed that he had stolen Fernand Ramakel's identification.
Right.
So the same guy, we're knocking on his door, this guy's taken his identification. Right. He got an international driver's license in his name with his date of birth, and then he came to Australia and he got a Queensland driver's licence in that same name. He kept the driver's licence so much so that he renewed it in 1988. He said it was in his wallet on the timeline of my mum when he was with my mum. He agrees that he had an affair with my mum.
Yep.
He said they only met 3 times. He said that he was there when the for sale sign was out the front of my mum's house, to give you some idea.
Yeah.
So we know he was in that mix
In
of
that
when
mix.
she's getting ready to leave. He actually accused my mum on the stand of stealing the driver's license out of his wallet, because he then said, I've lost it, I don't have it. And I think Marion stole it because she wanted to change her name to that. And the crazy thing about it is, if you look at Fernand's middle name is Nicholas. Rick Blum wrote Nicholas. He has a habit of changing vowels in names. We've picked up on this. And Mum changed her name to Florabella Natalia. Throw the Marion in, but Ramakel. So they're the same initials as well, which we thought was quite interesting.
I've seen that, and I'm not alluding to the fact that this is why he did it, but it's a good fraudster's trick to have.
Well, he has been charged. He has a long history of fraud offences. He's been in prison for fraud.
I think that came out in the inquest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yes, it got wildly crazy at that point, and everyone was losing their marbles.
Well, there's a lot of... Normally we'd put a whiteboard up at this point in time, and there was information about your mum's travels and the correlation between your mother's travels in the time that she went to Europe in 97 and that of Rick Blom's.
Yep. So he flew out on the Wednesday, which I think is the 18th of June.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to add this because I think it's important. So Mum had resigned from her job, and the Friday was end of term. So she's waited until the Friday, end of term. She's come for dinner at our house on the Saturday, and she's left on the Sunday. So she flew out on the 22nd. He flew out on JAL, Japanese airline, to Japan. My mum flew out on Korean Air airline, and she landed in South Korea. And just for those that don't know, when you leave Australia, Interpol actually only make a reference of where you land on your first point of call. So if you're going to Singapore or going to London via Singapore will be noted as your destination on Interpol. And the same when you're coming back in. So we know Mum was in Hong Kong because that's what it says on her incoming passenger card, but that's obviously like a stopover from coming from Europe. Or from the UK. So that's where you go to the abyss, pretty much. And that was really frustrating because we didn't know where she went. She did write to me, as I said earlier in the last episode, that she'd written to me on notepaper, and that notepaper actually came from a hotel in Japan, Hotel Nikko in Narita. Now, when Rick Blum was interviewed by police, they asked him, where did you stay when you went on that trip in the June of 1997 in Japan? And he just very quickly remembered and said, I stayed at Hotel Nikko Narita. And I nearly fell off my chair. I was like, what? He stayed at the same hotel as Mum has written to me on the notepaper. So, yes, it was crazy.
And this was the stationery from that hotel.
Correct.
The letter that your mum's written, the stationery there.
Yes.
And there's a lot of other coincidences, and we could go into them all, but I think we'll draw on some of the opinions of the coroner, what the coroner found, because the inquest that went, I think it sat for 25 days, ran for over 25 days. So
they said it was an unprecedented amount of time, and it was costing over $1 million is what they told me.
Yeah.
And I went, well, that's okay because my mum's actually worth it, so let's keep going if we need to keep going. So, but it was hard. It was not pleasant.
Well, it was before the magistrate, the state coroner, Magistrate Teresa O'Sullivan, and she handed down the findings on the 29th of February last year. But the inquest commenced on the 21st of June 2021 and concluded on the 2nd of June 2023. Ran for over 25 days. So, yeah, that's a long inquest.
Yeah.
I'm thinking I don't know of any other that's run longer other than the William Tyrrell matter, and that's
ongoing,
way longer.
Yeah.
So to explain what the role of the coroner is, so the coroner first, and I put it here because if listeners don't understand, the coronial court is not a criminal court. So that's important. The coronial court is an inquest. And the role of the coroner is to find out if someone's deceased, which in the case of your mother, it wasn't determined. So the coroner's it's been referred to the coroner to make a determination if your mother's deceased. And then when your mother died and how she died and where, time and date. They're the type of things that the coroner's looking for. Was that explained to you before the inquest?
Well, I was lucky enough to befriend Mark and Faye Leveson, and they had actually, I know you worked on their case with Matt, and they were really, very important people for me at that point because I was learning what I had to do, whether I needed counsel assisting, whether I needed legal teams, how it all worked and what I was in for. Joni also has a background in social work, so she's actually been involved in inquest before, and she was telling me it's a fact-finding mission is how she sort of worded it to me, and it made sense to me that this isn't a criminal procedure. I also kept getting told by legal teams that the inquest is about two things, Sally. One, is your mum alive or is she deceased? And two, did the police do their job properly? So as far as the coroner is concerned, they were the two main factors that she had to consider. Then, of course, we've brought in this person who she referred to as a significant person of interest, and we heard all his evidence, and we paused the inquest. They vacated. Sadly, they didn't tell me they vacated, and I flew my whole family down, and we got a car and hotels and everything. Cost us about $6,000 3 weeks before Christmas, and we arrived in Sydney, and then my lawyer rang me and said, "Hey, just wanted to let you know they vacated." I said, "What does that even mean?" And he said, "Oh, they've postponed it." And I went, "Oh my God, well, we're here." He goes, "What? Why are you here?" I said, "Because we came down a day early to see my dad, and brought the whole family, brought the kids, prepared myself mentally that I was going to be told for the first time that my mum's deceased." And it paused. And look, end of the day, it was a good thing because they did go and interview more people and bring witnesses to the table.
At that time, and the police that took the matter to the inquest was the homicide or unsolved homicide led by Nigel Warren and two other officers.
Yes, correct.
Working on it.
Yeah.
So you felt that inquiries were being made that should be made. Like I've had a lot of detectives on here, and you're stacking up with some very good detectives. Maybe you should have got into the Queensland Police. Right. But you were satisfied that genuine inquiries were being made, the type of inquiries that should have been made in the first place, and maybe we wouldn't be sitting here. Yeah,
and look, and this is where it gets down to the nitty-gritty, as you said, like, there's an unprecedented amount of days that they've already given to my mum's inquest and how much it's costing. There was a lot that Joni and I were sitting behind my legal team, and we were literally feeding all this information going, "Oh, what about this person? And what about this person? And we should talk to this person." And it just got to the point where it was irrelevant to ask those questions based on what the purpose of the inquest was about. And I did understand that, as hard as it was. Yeah.
There was a lot of evidence, and Mr. Blum, how long was he in the witness box for?
My memory is it was 13 days.
Okay, so a fairly extensive cross-examination.
His wife was there too. I think she was on for 2 days.
Yep. So there's in the coroner's findings, there's a couple of comments that I've pulled out from the coroner just to put it in perspective, because we're getting your version and I'm hearing all the details, but this is the coroner that oversaw that extensive inquest, and these are some of the findings that she came to. And I'm making sure that we read it out properly so we're not misrepresenting it. So I find that Mr. Blum, whilst in an intimate relationship with Marion, persuaded or otherwise encouraged her to sell her house in 1997. The evidence is not sufficient to prove that Mr. Blum played any causative role in Marion's decision to resign from her employment. So, breaking that down, she found that Mr. Blum, in a relationship with Marion, so this is something that's been established, persuaded or otherwise encouraged her to sell her house in 1997. So we're saying that this relationship was that intense or whatever was going on there, that he is the reason why that your mother sold the house.
Yeah. Well, think about it too. She changed her name to his.
Yeah. Okay. some other comments, and just breaking it down because it's such a complex thing as we're seeing, that will rely upon what the coroner is saying about her findings. Now, there was that $80,000 worth of $80,000 which was withdrawn from your mother's account.
Yeah, so on the 15th of October.
Yeah.
So if I wind back early, when she just, like after she's come back in, $5,000 every day was being withdrawn. We found a letter that my grandfather had kept that my cousin gave to me, which says there's increments of $500 in there as well. So there was a bit of controversy as to whether it was $5,000 or $500. I stand firm that the lady said to me $5,000.
Yeah.
My husband was sitting at the dinner table, and Renee was too, and it's been said forever that it was $5,000. So she did bank with the Commonwealth Bank, and she also banked with Colonial State Bank.
Yep.
So, and at the very outset in the inquest, they were trying to tell me that my memory was wrong and that my mum didn't bank with the Commonwealth Bank. But then I was very pleased to see when the Commonwealth Bank came in and threw out a whole statement of all of the bank accounts that she'd held with them. And I went, see, I'm not delusional. She did bank with the Commonwealth Bank. And so there was a bit of that going back and forth. But then there was a pause through like the end of September, early October, but on the 15th of October, $80,000 was electronically transferred out of my mum's bank account. What really upsets me, if I go back to the very beginning in 1997, the police officer actually writes this on the police report, that $80,000 was electronically transferred. He says in it, it's assumed to buy a house overseas.
Big assumption.
And I'm like, where did you get that from? And so what I'm upset about in that instance is, if he knew that $80,000 had been transferred, why didn't he get the bank statement to see where that $80,000 went? Because that would actually tell us where we are. I would not be doing this half my life.
No.
If that simple thing had been done. And the reality of it is that the $80,000, Rick Blum handed in a document. And I don't know if he did this on purpose or not, but anyway, he gave a document to the coroner that was a statement from Commonwealth Bank in Ballina showing his address. So that was the purpose of that document. And when I looked at it, I looked at the date and I went, oh my God, that's the 14th of October. And he opened a bank security envelope that day. So I ring Nigel Warren and I was like, Nigel, have you noticed that? And he goes, no, I haven't yet. And it was just mind-blowing for me, because I just put two and two together, and
so
there's been no official anything for Mr. Blum. I just want to say that there's nothing to say that he was involved or not. The coroner's made her comments about it, but it just seems a little coincidental to me that on the 14th of October, he opened a bank security envelope. He was the only person. His wife was not noted on it or anything. And then the next day, $80,000 comes out of my mum's bank account. He closes that bank security envelope 13 days later.
Okay. We can't make assertions. They're just the facts. So
just the facts.
We're presenting the facts. But the coroner can offer their opinion in regards to these matters, especially after an extensive inquest. And this is what the coroner said in regards to the withdrawal of a large amount of cash by your mother. I repeat the finding I have made at 304, that there is sufficient factual basis to make a finding that Marion withdrew the sums of money in August 1997 and transferred $80,000 to an unknown account in October 1997 on the encouragement of Mr. Blum and in circumstances where Marion believed that she was in a relationship with him. However, as counsel assisting submitted, there is not enough evidence for a finding to the requisite standard as to whether and when Mr. Blum actually received some or all of Marion's money. Okay, so she's saying there, my interpretation of it is that he was involved in the withdrawal of the money, but they can't say whether he received all of it or a sum of it.
Yeah.
That's
and if I can make a point here too, Gary, that something that's sort of only just come to me in probably in the last 12 months is that Joni and I quite often chat about, when did my mum pass away? Like, at what point can we firmly say she's not here anymore? And we were sort of talking about the fact that she'd sent postcards to everyone and letters to everybody, and she was keeping everybody, they were like little droppings of, here I am, this is where I've been, I visited here, I'm going to Amsterdam to see the sunflowers. She was doing that. And so we sort of had a hunch of where she was going and what she was doing. And the fact that Christmas was upon us, she could have actually just kept in touch with Owen for his birthday. So Owen's birthday is the 18th of October. So think about this. The money, the $80,000 comes out on the 15th of October. 3 days later is his birthday. She doesn't ring him on his birthday. If she was intentionally trying to disappear herself, didn't want me going to the police saying, hey, something's wrong, she just would have sent a card or done something at that point, is our belief, just to buy her a bit more time.
I understand what you've saying.
You know what I mean? Then she's got till Christmas until the
thinking
next point of call. So Joni and I have been toying with this for a while. And what makes my heart break even harder is that if you think about, I ring Owen, he tells me he hasn't spoken to her, then I ring him the next day, so that's the 19th. Then on the 20th, Chris and I believe is that when we went down, but regardless, the 22nd is when the police have written, we've been to Byron Bay Police. That's only 7 days from when that 80,000 came out.
Yeah.
Why was that information was fresh at hand? It could have been absolutely solved in that heartbeat.
We're talking hypothetically here, but if you came in and reported that to a police station, the information that you had available at the time, to follow up those bank records, check on the names, all the inquiries that could have been made at the time, it would have been a very simple exercise. Where that would have taken us,
Who
place,
knows? Yeah.
I don't know, but it would have been a simple exercise.
And to be fair, I didn't know about the 80,000 at that point, but they did, because he wrote it on the file.
Yeah.
And I didn't learn about that until I got the Freedom of Information file in 2018.
Well, they're the type of inquiries you make.
Yeah.
Like if someone's missing, if they're an adult and they've got bank accounts, are they accessing their bank accounts? Are they receiving a pension? All sorts of things that you would do. The coroner also stated in the findings regarding Mr. Blum being in contact with your mother following her return to Australia in August 1987. Which I think is a significant thing. And this is the comments of the coroner after hearing all the evidence. There is a sufficient basis for me to make a finding that Mr. Blum was in communication with Marion and played some role in her life following her return to Australia in August 1997. So, gone overseas, come back, money withdrawn. He's around there at the time. This is the coroner's findings, not our speculation or assumptions.
Yeah. Let me explain. Joni and I have done a massive dive on Mum's timeline.
Yep.
Because that was something that wasn't really the focus, we felt, even during the inquest. Like, there wasn't really a lot of that about her coming back in at that time and what happened. So we know that her passport lands back in Brisbane on the 2nd of August.
Yeah.
She's written on her incoming passenger card that she's staying for 8 days and staying at the Novotel Hotel in Brisbane.
Yep.
So that takes us up to the 10th. On the 11th, Rick Blum purchases a car for $4,000. It's a rust bucket from a local car dealer that we have spoken to, who remembers the transaction quite well. He said that there was a woman with dark hair sitting in the car across the road waiting for him while he was purchasing that car.
Yep.
This is in Wollongbar on northern New South Wales. 2 days later, my mum's Medicare card is used at Grafton. 3 days later, money starts coming out of her bank account in Byron Bay. Some days in Burleigh, which is back up in Queensland. So back in those days, it probably was about a 2.5 hour drive, right? Now, people who have followed me from the beginning will know that Mum left her car with me. So she had no car, no house. Where was she? What was she doing during that period of time? And all her pings are happening in northern New South Wales. And then she disappears at the $80,000 mark for the 15th of October.
Money's gone out.
So that's her timeline. That's all we know. But it is quite interesting when you look at it.
The coroner also made the following comments. Mr. Blum's evidence in the final days of the inquest, when asked by counsel assisting, would you like to say anything further in relation to the disappearance of Marion Barter, was extraordinary. This evidence, along with his lies and deception throughout the inquest, has convinced me that he does indeed know more than he is saying. I make the following further findings regarding Mr. Blum. 1. That he has further knowledge about the circumstances of Marion's travel overseas. 2. That he has further knowledge of his relationship with her in the months prior to her disappearance. 3. That he has further knowledge of her circumstances following her return from overseas. 4. That he has further knowledge of the withdrawals and transfer of her money. And 5. That there is sufficient basis for a finding that he was and is deliberately unwilling to divulge this further knowledge to the court. Again, pretty damning.
But I was just left at that point.
Yeah, I want to talk about that when the actual findings come down. Let me just read this on, and it's I put it there. I put it in so what we're talking about, that hopefully we can get it out there. I should put on record that the Coroner's Court is not a criminal court. No person is on trial when they appear at inquest. We cannot say Mr. Blum was involved in your mother's disappearance. We are just relaying the findings of the coroner. If there was sufficient evidence against a known person, the coroner has the option of suspending the inquest and referring the matter to the Office of Director of Public Prosecutions. And this was not the case in your mother's inquest. So I'm putting that disclaimer out on what we're talking about, so we're making it very clear that, these are the findings of the coroner, but the matter wasn't referred to the DPP. But hearing those type of comments, and I pick up on your body language now, and just it's almost like it's an anticlimax for you, isn't it?
It's really frustrating. It's very frustrating to get to all that. Like, it took me 26 years to get to that point.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you think about all the twists and turns and the upheaval that I've had to go through with even just having her listed as missing, then they say she's located, then they say she's not located, now she's missing person on the National Register, go and be the face of missing persons. Actually, no, you can't be the face of missing persons. Like, it's just been a massive ride for me. And I do this now still because I don't want anyone else to have to do what I've had to go through, and it needs to change on multiple levels. It needs to, like, the police need to understand their language and how they talk to people who are living in this world. There needs to be government bodies who need to look at some of these policies and procedures about things like absentia. You know, in other countries, if someone goes missing, after 7 years, the next of kin can actually access their private information. If I'd been able to access her private information 7 years after she went missing, I would have probably got things like the Medicare card with a potential address on it and a phone number for me to be able to work out where she is, or look at her bank statements while those things were still available before they're destroyed. And this is where it gets hard, because some people go, well, why is Sally only looking now? I've been looking forever. But, you know, it's the restraints on you as someone living with a missing person, even as the next of kin. You are absolutely powerless until such time as you get a death certificate. And, you know, I go back to the scenario where I'm reading through the file and I've got the Coroner's Court actually requesting a P79B form multiple times over that duration, and there was no one handling the case, so therefore no one had done a P79B form, which is a form that you fill in and send into or the police fill in and send into a coroner if a person has not been seen or cited and deemed potentially deceased within a year of that person going missing. And that didn't happen for my mum.
So all these little failings. The coroner didn't miss the police in regards to it. The coroner also made some comments in regards to the adequacy of the police investigation, because this inquest was interesting. It was about whether your mother's still alive and the adequacy of the police investigation. So that was the terms of reference that the coroner was finding. And this is a finding that she handed down regarding the police investigation that coroner stated. I would also add that Detective Chief Inspector Brown gave very clear and useful evidence to the court about what he expected should have happened in 1997. The resistance in this inquest by New South Wales Police to accept the inadequacies of the initial police investigation in 1997 is difficult to understand in circumstances where a senior police officer has given what is essentially expert evidence on what should have happened. So it looks, my take on that, they were still digging down that, I know we did everything that we could do.
It was hard. My husband and I both were challenged by New South Wales Police barrister. It was pretty rough, and it was captured and put on the Lady Vanishes. We actually did all of the episodes about the inquest, and people were watching live. There were thousands of people following along on YouTube, and it was not pleasant for me. And that whole theory about, an inquest is about looking after the family and making sure the family are okay, that was not the case at all. That's when I went on heart medication, because I was getting put through the ringer. We were getting quizzed, like Chris and I both getting quizzed about when we booked our holiday to go skiing. And, why didn't I write down notes when Mum rang me on that last phone call? And I was trying to explain she wasn't missing.
Yeah.
She was not missing when we booked our holiday or when she rang me on the phone. Do you write down every time your mum talks to you on the phone? Do you make a little note in the diary? Hey, Mum said this, and it was this time and this date. It doesn't happen. That's not logical to do that. And I was getting quizzed and criticised for not doing that as a 23-year-old at the time, and also the criticism of me. I didn't walk into the police station and use the word missing. So I think that's mainly what the coroner is referring to there, and that was hard to hear for a lot of people, I think.
I said it to you at the start when you said that. Don't put any of the blame on yourself. You've done more than what most people would do. I think the point here that I'd like to make, because people assume the way I finished my career, this is a chance to beat up on New South Wales Police. Not at all. I like to think if we make mistakes, we make sure these mistakes don't happen again. And I'm heartened by the fact that it looks like Inspector Brown called them out on the failings.
Yeah.
It's sad that the coroner is saying that the police were still resistant to acknowledging it, because I think the best thing, if a mistake has been made, acknowledge the mistake and move on. I know, not just from your matter, I know practices in missing persons have been improved in recent times, and I hope this is a lesson. And it might be in part because of the noise that you've made to make sure practices have been improved. But I hope people listening understand the impact of, if things aren't done properly from the start. This is now 27 years down the track or more, and you've had to carry that burden.
Next month's 28 years in June.
I hadn't actually thought of it until I've sat down opposite you here today. It's not just the fact that the frustration of not finding out what happened to your mother and problems or mistakes that were made in the initial investigation, but the fact that you had to, carry with you, based on information that the police have provided to you, that your mother just doesn't want to talk to you. So that's another burden that you've had to carry.
Yeah, I just ignored that. I'm like, I know my mum loved me.
Good on you.
It's I don't need them to tell me otherwise. But I knew something was wrong, and I knew there was a man in the car, and I just my brain was just going a million miles an hour, going, something's not right. Yeah.
Well, the coroner, and this is what the coroner is required under Section 81(1). There's a couple of key things that the coroner has to come to a conclusion at the inquest, and I'll just read those out, and then we can talk about that too. In regards to the identity of the deceased, the person who died was Florabella Natalia Marion Remarkle, formerly known as Marion Barter. Date of death? While unable to determine the exact date of death, I find that Florabella Natalia Marion Remarkle, formerly known as Marion Barter, is likely to have died on a date after the 15th of October 1997. Place of death? I'm unable to determine the place of death. Cause of death? I'm unable to determine the cause of death of Florabella Natalia Marion Remarkle, formerly known Marion Barter's death. So, doesn't know the cause, place, date of death, suggesting after the 15th of October. In regards to the manner of death, I'm unable to determine the manner. So, for all your battles, all your endeavours to find out what's happened to your mum, all these years later, the inquest, the build-up, seeing all these things that have played out and getting what you've seen, which the coroner's obviously commented on about Rick Blum, and the issues there is unreliability, and you're left with basically acknowledgement that your mother's died, but we're not sure how, where, or why.
It's a chronic week. My father-in-law died on the Sunday.
Yep.
So Chris was busily packing up his accommodation where he was in care on the Tuesday, and we flew down on the Wednesday. Caught up with one of my best friends that I was working at Pizza Hut with when I was 18. We'd been friends our whole lives pretty much from there. He came and met us in the city just to come and say hi. There was a couple of us just gathering, having a drink before the coroner's findings the next day. Go to the coroner's findings. I hear for the first time my mum's deceased. He then died the following Wednesday. He had a problem with his heart and he died. And so within a week, I lost one of my best friends, I lost my father-in-law, and I got told my mum's deceased. But at that point for me, with mum, I felt like everyone just wished me well and went about their business. So the legal teams, the lawyers, Crown solicitors.
Like you've had a victory.
No, just like they all just left. Like I literally just was there by myself. I had so many people come. Like it was amazing. I had people come. They all wore green. Had made massive support for mum, and that just made me feel so much better being in that situation. But from a legal standpoint and from the police, I've just been told that they've got 800 cases and they've got to prioritise. That my mum's case is open but inactive, and good luck. Because Joni and I had decided we were going to go on a trip overseas to do more research about the things that we knew we needed to do, and we did that. So, it's been wild. It's been a wild ride, and it doesn't stop just because the coroner has said what I've felt for a long time. Yeah, I was very grateful for the coroner. She had really good. I just had a nice way about her. She greeted me well. She recognised me. She did a good job, I think, of managing an inquest that was very hard to sit through. Very, very hard to sit through. So I'm very grateful to her and everybody who worked on it, the Crown solicitors and the current, homicide team. But it just makes it hard when her findings stopped short of pushing it forward for further investigation.
Yeah, well, one of the recommendations, New South Wales Commissioner of Police calls the investigation into the death of the missing person to be referred to or remain with State Crime Command Unsolved Homicide Team for ongoing investigations, review and monitoring. So, there's as you'll flag, there's a lot of cases there. Hoping it gets the attention, but I understand what you're saying. Like the build-up, you've got all this information. You're thinking, okay, are we going to get some form of justice, or at least find out what's happened to her mother? And then that's been yes, she's deceased, but you're left with where do you go from here? Yeah.
And look, I've come across quite a few missing persons cases where the person might be missing, but the police don't deem that person to be missing. And, that was me for a long time. And therefore, I was in a different circumstance where my mum had sold her house. So she didn't have a house to, deal with or contend with and things like that. But she did have her bank accounts. And I think I mentioned that, they kept taking the monthly fees from my missing person's mum's bank account. And they were very kind, and they just credited them back to the account. And it wasn't a huge amount of money, but, I think of all those things, and I've spoken to some people who were married to somebody who's gone missing, but they don't deem that person missing in a legal sense of the word. They don't get a death certificate, and therefore they can't sell the house. They can't move forward. They're locked in this world because of the privacy issue, because that person they believe could have chosen to go missing. And I kept getting told all the time through my journey, oh, well, it's not a crime to go missing, Sally. And I said, well, maybe it should be. Because the amount of money and time and effort and we spend, and government money and taxpayer money to go and find missing persons, and when you're talking 40,000 people a year are going missing, and there's no funding in Australia. There is an offence in New South Wales. I'm not sure if it's applicable to it, but public mischief, where your actions cause the police to investigate a crime. Maybe. Maybe. I don't know. I said at the start I want to ask you a question. What's the best outcome you could get with your mother's disappearance now? Best outcome? If someone said,
What are you really hoping for?
I would really like justice to be served.
Yep.
My mum was a person. My mum matters. Hence why I've started my new podcast called The Missing Matter.
Yep.
Because the missing do matter, and justice needs to be served, and it shouldn't be judged upon whether one case should go forward or not. It should just be a case of if the evidence is there and there's something to move forward on, they should.
With the new podcast,
Mm-hmm.
what are you hoping to achieve?
Well, the podcast, The Lady Vanishes, ended when the inquest ended.
Yep.
And, to be fair to Channel 7, I guess, I was with them for 6 years. It was a very long journey with them. When they first met me, they were like, oh, yep, we'll whip together 7 or 8 episodes. It'll be done. We'll get the story out there and hopefully we might find something. But it became this ongoing live investigation we were telling the story in real time. So it became bigger than Ben-Hur for us. And, my goal was to get to an inquest. I said that from the very outset. I said, I just want a proper investigation. I haven't felt like I haven't had that, and I feel like going to inquest would be a really great opportunity for us to do a proper investigation into what's happened to my mum, and I'll be satisfied with that. That then changed a little bit in my head because I then got the death certificate. I was told that she had passed, which allowed me to get the death certificate. That's a whole nother story in itself. And I don't know. Last year I was just sort of recording myself because I'd become this person who records everything now because of probably the trauma of not recording and being in a position of not having that as evidence or information. So that's who I've become as a person. It drives my family bananas. I tell my kids to record everything, and just when I say record, if I get off the phone to somebody, I will just do a voice memo to myself to remind me of what happened in that phone call, because I know too often I've done that, or I'm in the car and then you forget and then you go, oh, what did they say again? So it became very important for me because I wasn't getting a lot in emails or in writing. It was all verbal. Yeah. So I would get off the phone and I'd jump on my voicemails on my phone and I'd actually voice memo myself. And that became a thing last year too, when I was trying to go through all the hoops that you go through when a person is actually declared deceased, who's missing. Yep. That's a whole nother ball game. I mentioned that my father-in-law and one of my best friends died the same week as my mum. Their affairs were tied up very quickly. I came down to the funeral for my friend within 10 days, and his having a burial, and we're going through those motions, and I'm sure there's paperwork and things after that. It took me up to December, from the same time, from February to December, before I actually had any formal closure of mum's life. And for me, it was just this part of the journey where I had to process and go through everything. So I was documenting that journey for me and myself. And then Joni and I, of course, had decided we were going to go overseas, and we were going to do our own investigation on the things that weren't addressed at the inquest. I asked her to come with me. She said yes. And so that became a thing. And we went away in October for 3 weeks. And we found some things. And so it became a thing where people were asking us, when are you going to tell us? When are you going to tell us what you found? Because by this point, I've got 27,000 people following me on Facebook now from my mere 1,000 back in, 2013. So I'd built up this amazing community of people who care, which is what's really given me the strength to keep going, I feel, over time. And they all kept saying, like, when are you going to tell us? When are you going to tell us? I'm like, well, I don't even know if I want to tell anybody. Like, maybe I just want to do it for myself, and maybe I just want to, find out. But I felt that they'd all been so dedicated to the purpose of helping me and coming up with these ideas. Even the little comment about the Luxembourg as recently as last night. Like, these people are so invested. I felt like, okay, maybe we could tell them. And then I was trying to work out how we would do that. And it just so happened that the idea of doing our own podcast with Joni and I came to play. So Joni was really nervous. She's like, oh, I've listened to podcasts for 20 years. I've never been on one, or certainly not our own. So it kind of just came out of nowhere. I've been talking and, using hashtag the missing matter for so long. Yeah. And Marion matters. And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, you know what? Everyone matters. Matthew matters. Janine Vaughan matters. James matters. they all matter. It doesn't matter where they've gone missing or how they've gone missing. If they're still not found, they matter, and we need to look after those people. So it kind of became a bit of a journey for me as to what I've had to deal with in the Missing Matter podcast, but in the hope that we can actually help other people in that same space.
Well, I honestly think you're inspiring the people that have been in the same situation. Let's hope there's not many people in the situation.
I hope not ever.
But, I said the same thing to Mark and Faye Leveson. Yeah, they have inspired people and helped people. I think you're in that position because you understand. And unless you've been in that position, you don't really get it.
Yeah.
And the other flip side of it too is making people accountable that are responsible for investigating people's disappearances. There needs to be that accountability. I think you've done a great job. I'm disappointed you didn't get in the Queensland Police and then swapped over to New South Wales. I could have used you on some investigations. You're very thorough.
Well, I've had to be, I guess, but that's just who I am as a person. I think, and I really, I was so passionate about it too. And it just, look, the circumstances of me getting in were just a little bit there with my husband. He was like, I don't know if I want you to be a police officer and, out on the beat at nighttime and us having babies. Like it was more about that. And I chose to be a mum. Yeah. Yeah. And, so glad I did because I've got 3 great children. And that's that and being a wife to Chris, who's just been my rock. We've been together for 30 years now, and he has been through all of this with me.
What's your happiest memory of your mum?
Oh, she was a very good cook, and I am really happy that I have actually got her cookbook that she had, and she's had that from when she was young. So you can see, and I love this because her writing was absolutely meticulous and beautiful and like very school teacher-esque, and then it gets to the end and it's just scroll. And I remember Adam Castleton during the inquest, he was trying to read one of her postcards and he mentioned that. He goes, I can hardly read her writing. And in it, the back of the book, she actually, this is how my mum became who she was later in life. So she'd be on the phone and her girlfriend's telling her about her carrot cake recipe, and she'd be writing it down on the back of a Christmas card or a back of, you remember those little flip diaries that you used to have with the pieces of paper and you'd flip them off? Yep. So she'd write little scribbles of what recipe it was and she'd just chuck it in the back of the book. So I've kept it exactly as it is. Her pavlova recipe's in there. Any of my girlfriends will, I'm sure, agree that the pavlova recipe is pretty amazing. So I'm pretty renowned for that. I've tweaked it a few times with a few different toppings, but it always reminds me of my mum. And cooking for me is my happy place, and memories for her out of her cookbook, which is lovely. Fantastic.
We've dug very deep into comments from the coroner. And I just want to, it's probably a good way to finish, that this is what the coroner said about you and your efforts to get justice for your mother. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'd like to acknowledge and commend Sally on her unwavering commitment and participation in the coronial investigation and inquest to find out what happened to her mother. She has shown fortitude, dignity, resilience and grace throughout these proceedings. That's pretty nice.
It was nice to hear that because I had been through the ringer. So I was very happy to sit her and go, I'm really happy that you've said that, coroner, because I did try very hard to stay composed, and there was times where I wanted to scream. There was a moment where they actually asked Rick Blum if he'd murdered my mother on the stand, and he said no. And then he got up and he left, and they helped him off the stand into his wheelie walker, and he walked out of the courtroom, and most of the people had left. And I remember leaning forward to the police commissioner's helper. Counsel, yes. And she had a box of tissues, and I said, would I please be able to have a tissue? And she handed me the tissue, and my whole body just went into an absolute freak of stress. I was shaking, I was crying, I had my head down in my lap, my whole body was convulsing. I've got the homicide team behind me, and my husband's yelling at them going, do more, like this is crazy, like, look at her, look how she's coping. So I don't break down. I'm pretty tough. I'm a pretty tough cookie, but that was a bad moment for me because I just felt like you get to that point and they say no.
Yeah.
And he walked away, and I just went, I just felt like my heart just fell on the floor.
Yeah, I can understand.
That was bad. But anyway, you pick yourself up and you keep going, right? There's no point in...
Well, I think the greatest compliment you can have as a detective is saying that I wouldn't want that person after me. And the person that might have knowledge or involvement in the disappearance of your mother, I wouldn't like to be that person with you on the tail. So,
well, you sadly didn't get to meet Joni. She's a cracker. She's all over it, and we've been working together for 6 years. And she keeps saying to me, "I'm going to keep going as long as you want me to. I'll keep going."
I love the passion and dedication, and that's what it takes. And never give up on it.
Yeah.
And we'll also shout out to anyone that's got any information about that. Bring it forward to the police. It's still being handled, and is it Detective Chief Inspector Nigel Warren is the officer in charge.
Yep.
I've worked with Nigel. I know his work, and he's a good operator. Pass the information on.
Yeah, he's a good guy. And we've also got a website too called The Missing Matter, and we've got an anonymous tip line on there too. So sometimes people have said to me, I didn't feel comfortable going to the police, or I didn't feel comfortable going to the media, and they've wanted to contact me. And I keep everything as tight-lipped as you can get, and I pass on everything to the police via that means if they choose to allow that to happen. It's been very difficult to manage that, but I think it's important to have it there just in case, just for people to feel comfortable if they do know something.
Okay. Well, thanks, Sally. Thanks for coming on the podcast, and I hope you get the answers that you're seeking. You deserve it.
Thank you very much. Thanks for everything you do too. I think you've done amazing things in life. So,
thank you.